This is Miss Alice. And today I want to say something directly to the men over 60 who are still searching. Stop. Not permanently. Not because partnership is wrong, or because love after 60 is impossible, or because you have somehow aged past the point where connection matters. Stop, because the searching itself is the problem. Because the energy you are pouring into finding someone is energy that belongs to something far more important than finding someone. And because the man who stops searching and starts building is always, without exception, the man who eventually has something worth sharing. I have watched men in their 60s and 70s chase partnership with the same urgency they brought to their careers in their 40s, as if finding the right woman before time runs out is the final project, the last thing that needs to be completed before the account closes. And what I have watched those men find is not what they were looking for. They find women who sense the urgency and position themselves as the answer to it. They find relationships that feel like solutions in the beginning and problems in the middle and regrets at the end. They find themselves 2 or 3 years later having lost time, money, peace, and the specific irreplaceable clarity that comes from a man who is genuinely at home inside his own life. Today I'm going to give you 10 powerful reasons why the search itself is costing you more than it is giving you, and what to build in the space the searching has been occupying. Because what you build in that space is not a consolation prize for a man who failed to find someone. It is the life that makes everything else possible, including the partnership you actually deserve when the right one arrives. Reason number 1. The urgency you are feeling is lying to you about what you actually need. There is a specific kind of urgency that settles into men in their 60s around the question of partnership. It feels like loneliness. It feels like the fear of running out of time. It feels like the recognition that the years ahead are fewer than the years behind, and that spending them alone would be a waste of whatever is left. That feeling is real, but what it is pointing at is not what it appears to be pointing at. The urgency is not telling you that you need a partner. It is telling you that something inside your life is incomplete, that there is a gap, a space, a dimension of your existence that is not being filled by anything currently in it. And the instinct to fill that gap with a person is understandable. It is the most familiar solution available. You have filled versions of that gap with people before, with a wife, with a family, with the structure of a relationship that gave your daily life its shape and its meaning and its sense of direction. But here's what the urgency is not telling you, and what I need to say clearly. A person is not a solution to an internal gap. A person is someone who arrives into a life that already has shape and meaning and direction and adds to what is already there. When a person arrives into a gap, when they are recruited to fill a space that should be filled by something else, they carry a weight they were not designed to carry. And they eventually collapse under it, or leave, or become the disappointment that every person becomes when they are expected to be a solution to a problem that is not actually theirs to solve. The urgency you are feeling is not a signal to search harder. It is a signal to look inward more honestly, to identify what is actually missing from your life and to address it directly rather than importing a person and expecting them to address it for you. That honest inward look is the beginning of everything worth building. Reason number 2. The men who attract genuine partnership are never the ones searching for it. I want you to understand this clearly because it is the most counterintuitive truth in this entire video and the one that will do the most work for you if you actually absorb it. The energy of searching is visible, not in an obvious performative way, in a subtle, ambient, underneath the surface way that women read with a precision that most men do not understand they are being read with. A man who is searching carries a specific quality in how he engages. There is a slight forward lean to his attention, a mild but consistent orientation toward whether this person, this woman he has just met or just started spending time with, might be the one. A subtle evaluation running constantly beneath the surface of every interaction. Is she what I am looking for? Could this become what I need? Is this finally the answer to the question I have been asking? Women feel that evaluation, even when it is gentle and even when it is well-intentioned. They feel it as pressure, as a dynamic where they are being assessed for a role rather than simply encountered as a person. And the response to that pressure, even in women who want partnership genuinely, is frequently to step back, to create distance, to become unavailable in the specific way that people become unavailable when they sense they are being needed rather than wanted. Now consider the man who is not searching, who has built a life so genuinely complete and so genuinely his that his engagement with a woman is simple curiosity rather than evaluation, who is interested in her not because she might be the solution, but because she is interesting, whose attention is fully present rather than slightly angled toward whether this becomes something, who can enjoy an encounter without needing it to become more than it is because his life is already more than enough without it becoming anything. That man produces a completely different response. He is compelling in ways that have nothing to do with what he says or does deliberately. He is compelling because his completeness is palpable. Because spending time with him feels like being in the presence of someone who chose to be there rather than someone who needed to be there. The man who stops searching becomes the man worth finding. That is not a paradox. It is the most reliable pattern in the entire landscape of late-life partnership. Reason number 3. You have spent enough of your life building things for other people. This chapter belongs to you. I want to say this without sentimentality because it deserves to be said clearly and without softening. You have spent decades, most of your adult life, building things that were not primarily for you. A career that supported people who depended on you. A home that was shaped by the preferences and needs of the people who lived in it with you. A schedule organized around the requirements of children, partners, employers, obligations that accumulated across years without ever fully being chosen. You showed up, consistently, often at personal cost. Often by setting aside things you wanted in service of things that were needed by people who counted on you to provide them. That chapter of your life produced real and important things. Children who exist because of you. A professional legacy that mattered. A contribution to the world that was real, even when it was invisible. These things are not nothing. They are significant. But that chapter is either over or nearly over. And what stands in front of you, however many years remain, and they are years worth taking seriously, is something you have not had before. A chapter that belongs to you. Not to a partner who needs you to organize your life around hers. Not to children who need you to prioritize their needs above your own. Not to an employer who owns your best hours and most productive years. To you, your curiosity, your preferences, your long-postponed interests, the places you wanted to go and never went, things you wanted to build and never built. The version of yourself that existed beneath the performance of all those roles and is still there, waiting for the space to exist fully. Filling this chapter with a search for partnership, with the specific obligation of a new relationship that will once again require you to organize significant portions of your life around someone else's needs, is not an upgrade from what you had. It is a re-enrollment in the same program under a different name. Build the chapter that belongs to you first, fully and without apology, and then decide from that fullness what, if anything, you want to add to it. Reason number 4. The patterns that produced your previous relationship outcomes have not automatically updated just because time passed. Here is the truth that is most uncomfortable to sit with and most important to sit with anyway. If the relationships in your past ended in ways that cost you something significant, if there were patterns in who you chose and how you related and what you tolerated and what you ignored, those patterns did not dissolve when the relationships ended. They came with you. And if you search for a new partner without examining those patterns honestly, you will find someone new and produce something familiar. The specific and exhausting familiarity of a different person delivering the same essential experience as the previous one, because the mechanism that chose the previous one is still running unchanged inside you. This is not a criticism. It is a description of how human psychology works. Patterns are persistent. They repeat until they are examined, and they are almost impossible to examine clearly while you are inside a relationship. because the relationship itself produces the very emotional conditions that make clear examination difficult. The period of being without a partner, the period you are currently in or approaching, is the specific and valuable window in which honest examination is actually possible. Use it, not as a period of waiting until the next relationship arrives, as an active, deliberate, sometimes uncomfortable period of genuinely understanding what produced the outcomes you have experienced, what you were drawn to and why, what you tolerated and why, what you missed in the early stages and why you missed it, what role you played in the dynamics that eventually became problems. The man who does this work does not just find a better partner, he becomes a better partner. And the relationship he eventually enters, if he enters one, is built on a foundation that the unexamined man never has access to. The examined life produces different relationships, always. Reason number 5. Your health at this stage of life is more important than your relationship status. And the search is costing you health you cannot afford to spend. This is the practical reality that nobody in the romance-focused conversation about late-life partnership is willing to say directly. The search for partnership at 60 and beyond is not free. It costs energy, emotional energy, the specific and finite resource that your body and mind have available to spend on the things that matter most in the years ahead. Every disappointing date costs something. Every relationship that begins with promise and ends with pain costs something. Every evening spent managing the emotional demands of a nascent relationship at the expense of sleep or exercise or the activities that maintain your physical and mental health costs something. At 35, those costs were recoverable. The body bounced back, the emotional reserves refilled relatively quickly. The investment was worth making because the recovery was available. At 65, the math is different. Recovery is slower. The body's reserves are more finite. The cost of emotional turbulence is not just discomfort. It is measurable impact on the physical systems that determine how the rest of your life actually goes. The men who arrive at 70 and 75 in genuinely good physical and mental condition are almost always the men who made their health the primary project of their 60s, who invested consistently in their physical condition, their sleep, their nutrition, their stress management, who protected their emotional reserves from the specific drain of relationships that were not genuinely nourishing. The search, and especially the disappointment cycle that the search reliably produces, is a significant draw on exactly those reserves. Protect them, not because love is not worth the cost, but because the version of you that arrives at your next decade in genuinely good condition is a far better candidate for genuine partnership than the version that arrived depleted by years of searching. Invest in your health first. The partnership that is worth having will find a man who took care of himself, not one who spent what was left searching. Reason number 6. The life you build alone is the life that determines the quality of any partnership you eventually have. This is the truth that the search obscures most completely, because when you are in the middle of searching, you are oriented outward. You are looking at what you might find, not at what you are building. And what you are building or failing to build while you search determines everything about the partnership that eventually arrives if one does. A man who arrives at a potential relationship with a genuinely full life, with interests and friendships and projects and a physical space that reflects who he actually is, arrives as someone whose presence adds something, who has something to contribute to a shared life that is not just need or availability, but genuine richness, who will not disappear into the relationship because the relationship is not the only thing filling him. That man produces a different quality of partnership because the woman who enters his life enters it as an addition to something that already works rather than as a rescue operation for something that does not. And the partnership built on that foundation has a structural soundness that the partnership built on mutual need never quite achieves. Because mutual need produces two people who require each other in ways that eventually become burdens. While genuine choice, the choice of two people who each have something full to bring, produces something that can sustain the inevitable difficulties of shared life, because neither person is entirely dependent on the relationship for the foundation of their daily meaning. Build the life first. The full, rich, genuinely yours life. Build it as if no one is coming, as if this is the final and complete version of what your life is. And then see what arrives into that completeness. What arrives will be different in quality from anything the search could have produced, because it arrives into something worth arriving into. Reason number 7. Solitude at this stage of life is not a waiting room. It is a destination worth inhabiting fully. The cultural story about solitude, especially for men in their later decades, is almost entirely wrong. It presents solitude as a problem, a condition to be remedied, a temporary state that should be resolved as quickly as possible through the acquisition of a partner who makes the aloneness go away. This story does enormous damage to men who are living through one of the most potentially valuable periods of their lives, and being told by the culture that what they are experiencing is a failure condition. Chosen solitude, the specific quality of being alone that comes from having made peace with your own company rather than simply lacking alternatives, is one of the rarest and most genuinely valuable states available to a human being. Inside it, things become audible that cannot be heard inside the noise of relationship. Your own preferences, your actual rhythms, the specific texture of a day organized entirely around what you genuinely value rather than what the relationship requires. The thoughts that surface when there is no one else's agenda competing with them for your attention. Inside it, things become visible that the busyness of shared life consistently obscures. What you actually think about things when you are not influenced by what someone else thinks. Who you actually are when you're not performing any role for anyone. What gives your life genuine meaning when you strip away the meaning that was borrowed from the structure of the relationship? These are not small discoveries. They are the discoveries that determine everything about the life that follows. The man who inhabits his solitude fully, who goes into it rather than away from it, who treats it as a place worth exploring rather than a problem worth escaping, comes out of it knowing things about himself that cannot be learned any other way. And the man who knows himself that clearly is a man who makes genuinely different choices about who he spends his time with and why. Stop treating solitude as a waiting room. It is not where you wait for your real life to begin. It may be where your real life finally does begin. Reason number 8. The relationships available to men who are searching are fundamentally different from the relationships available to men who are not. This is that most conversations about late-life partnership skip entirely because it requires being honest about something uncomfortable. When a man in his 60s is visibly searching, when his availability and his urgency are apparent, he attracts a specific kind of attention. Not necessarily from bad people, but from people whose interest in him is shaped by what his searching signals about his needs. His searching signals that he is lonely, that he has a gap, that he is looking for someone to fill a specific role in his life. And that information, the information that he needs something, is available to be acted on by anyone who wants to offer themselves as the solution. This is not predatory in most cases. Most people are genuinely looking for connection, but the dynamic it creates is not the dynamic that produces the best outcomes. Because the relationship that begins with one person providing what another person urgently needs is a relationship where the power is distributed unevenly from the first moment. And unevenly distributed power in the beginning becomes resentment and dysfunction in the middle and regret at the end. The man who is not searching, whose completeness is visible, and whose engagement is curiosity rather than need, attracts something different. He attracts the interest of people who want to be in the presence of that completeness rather than people who want to fill a role in someone else's incompleteness. That distinction is the difference between a relationship that is built on need and a relationship that is built on genuine mutual desire. And the quality of those two relationships across time is not comparable. The man who stops searching does not just save himself from the disappointment cycle. He changes the quality of what is available to him when he is found. Reason number 9. The friendships and community available in your 60s are more important for your well-being than any romantic partnership, and most men are neglecting them in pursuit of the wrong thing. Research on this is consistent and has been for decades. The quality of a man's social connections, not his romantic partnership specifically, but his broader network of genuine human connection, is one of the strongest predictors of his health, his cognitive function, and his life satisfaction in later decades. Not the quality of his marriage, the quality of his connections broadly. Men who have deep friendships, genuine community, regular meaningful contact with other people who know them and value them and engage with them honestly. Those men live longer, think more clearly, report more genuine satisfaction, and recover from adversity more effectively than men who have romantic partnership but lack the broader social infrastructure. And here is the specific and important implication of that research for men who are searching for a romantic partner. The energy being poured into the search, the evenings spent on dating apps, the emotional investment in potential relationships that mostly do not develop, the specific drain of the disappointment cycle, is energy that could be building exactly the kind of social infrastructure that the research identifies as most important. The friendship that has been neglected because life got busy, the community that was always interesting but never quite joined, the group of men who share his interests and would value his presence if he showed up consistently. The relationship with his adult children that could go deeper if he invested in it more deliberately. These connections are not consolation prizes for a man who failed to find romantic partnership. They are the primary infrastructure of a genuinely good late life. And the man who builds them is not just filling time while he waits for someone to arrive. He is building the specific foundation on which everything else, including any eventual partnership, will rest most securely. Reason number 10, the man who builds something worth having becomes the man worth finding. And that arrival, when it comes, is nothing like what the search was producing. I want to close with this because it is the truth that makes everything else worth doing. The man who takes all of the preceding reasons seriously, who stops searching and starts building, who examines his patterns and invests in his health and inhabits his solitude fully and deepens his friendships and builds a life that is genuinely and completely his. That man does not disappear from the possibility of partnership. He transforms his relationship to it. He stops being the man who needs someone to arrive. He becomes the man whose life is so genuinely full and so genuinely his that someone arriving into it would be adding to something rather than completing something, would be choosing a man who had chosen himself rather than rescuing a man who had been waiting to be chosen. And the woman who arrives into that kind of life, who encounters a man who has done this specific and difficult work of becoming genuinely complete, does not arrive as a solution. She arrives as a recognition, as someone who sees what was built and finds it worth adding herself to. That kind of arrival is qualitatively different from anything the search produces. The search produces transactions. Two people assessing each other for roles and finding candidates or not finding candidates and moving on. The arrival I am describing produces something else. The specific and rare encounter of two people who each have something genuinely full to bring and who recognize in each other a completeness that makes the prospect of adding to it together genuinely compelling. That is worth building toward. That is worth doing all of the preceding work for. But it does not arrive because you searched for it. It arrives because you stopped searching and built something worth finding instead. Stop the search. Start the building. The man who builds does not have to find what he is looking for. What he is looking for finds him. I want to hear from the men watching this. Are you in the search right now? Have you been through the cycle enough times that something in this video landed as the recognition you needed? Or are you the man who already made this choice, who stopped searching and started building and found what I described on the other side of it? Tell me in the comments. Because the men reading this who are standing at the decision point right now need to hear from the men who already made it. And if there is a woman watching this who loves a man in his 60s who is searching, share this with him, not as a criticism, as the most honest gift available. Share this if it said something true. This is Miss Alice, and I will be back with more of what nobody else will say. Subscribe if you're ready to keep hearing it.